Chapter 1. The Unyielding. The rumble of the ship's engines thrummed through Commander Eric Hale's bones, a steady pulse that had become his heartbeat over the long years of battle. Earth's last fleet hovered in formation around him, a handful of ships silhouetted against the vastness of space, standing as humanity's final defense against the Council's endless armada. The comm console crackled to life, jarring Hale from his thoughts. An alien voice, smooth but sharp-edged, echoed across the bridge. "Commander Hale of the Terran Forces, this is Chancellor Vrexka of the Intergalactic Council. Surrender, and your people will be spared. Resist, and you will be extinguished. Your defiance serves no purpose." Hale clenched his jaw, fingers gripping the edge of the console. He could feel the weight of every life in the fleet pressing down on his shoulders, a burden as cold and unyielding as the metal beneath his hands. The Council's forces loomed in the distance, a mass of alien vessels far outnumbering his own. Their weapons could tear through his ships like paper, but the thought of bending to them, to surrender everything humanity had fought for, felt like an insult he couldn't swallow. "Sir?" Lieutenant Mari Chen's voice was soft, but there was a steely edge beneath it. She stood at his side, eyes trained on him with a mixture of respect and apprehension. "Are we sure this is the right call?" Hale turned to her, his gaze hard. "Would you rather kneel, Lieutenant? Bend to their demands? Give them the satisfaction of erasing everything we stand for?" She swallowed, a flicker of doubt in her eyes, but she held her ground. "I just think maybe survival has its own value. We're outmatched, sir, and if surrender buys us more time—" "They won't stop," he interrupted, his voice low but fierce. "You know that as well as I do. They'll take what they want, reshape us into their vision. We surrender, and we lose what makes us us." He could see the internal conflict playing out on her face, the struggle between the instinct to survive and the desire to preserve their humanity. But she nodded, silent, as though she too could feel the weight of what lay before them. The comms crackled again, Vrexka's voice slicing through the tense air. "This is your final warning, Commander. Surrender now, or be swept aside." Hale's lip curled. "Message received, Chancellor," he replied, his tone edged with defiance. "We will not surrender." A tense silence filled the bridge. Chen exhaled softly, almost a sigh, but there was no turning back now. The lines had been drawn. Hale glanced around, meeting the eyes of his crew, one by one. Every face was etched with exhaustion and fear, but they looked to him with a trust that had been forged over battles and years of hardship. "Prepare for combat," he ordered, his voice steady. "This is our line, and we will hold it." The crew moved with swift efficiency, adjusting systems, rerouting power, readying weapons. Hale watched them work, a faint sense of pride mingling with the dread in his gut. They weren't soldiers by choice. They were survivors, engineers, scientists, all forced into this war simply because they refused to let their home be trampled underfoot. A low hum filled the bridge as the weapon systems charged, and outside, he could see the Council ships shifting into attack formation, a wall of sleek, glinting metal against the starry void. Hale's heart pounded as he took his position at the center of the bridge, bracing himself for the inevitable onslaught. "First wave incoming," one of the officers shouted, eyes wide as the alien vessels advanced. The ship shuddered violently as the first shots hit, a jolt that nearly threw Hale off balance. Sparks flew from a console nearby, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. The crew scrambled to compensate, rerouting power, struggling to keep the shields intact. "Status report," Hale barked, gripping the rail to steady himself. "We're holding, sir," Chen replied, her voice strained. "But they're hammering us hard. Shields are at 70%. No 60. Hale clenched his teeth, watching as more enemy fire rained down, relentless. The Council ships were larger, more advanced, their technology decades beyond anything Earth could produce. But Hale knew that raw power wasn't everything. Humanity had learned to adapt, to turn desperation into innovation, to fight with a ferocity that surprised even him sometimes. "Target their engines," he ordered, a flash of inspiration striking him. We don't need to destroy them, just slow them down. Make them work for every inch. The bridge was tense as the crew executed his plan, fingers flying over consoles, directing fire with calculated precision. The human ships, smaller and more maneuverable, darted through the barrage, exploiting the gaps in the Council's formation. Hale's orders were sharp, strategic, each decision an attempt to prolong their survival just a little longer. One by one, the Council ships began to falter, their engines sputtering as humanity's fleet managed to hold them back, if only barely. Hale felt a surge of grim satisfaction as he saw the alien vessels stagger, forced to pull back slightly under the unexpected resistance. But the respite was short-lived. Vrexka's voice cut through the comms once more, laced with frustration. This defiance is meaningless, Commander. You cannot win. Even if you delay the inevitable, you are only prolonging your people's suffering. Hale's gaze hardened. Our suffering is our choice, Chancellor. We'd rather fight and fall than live on our knees. The Council ships shifted, regrouping, preparing for a second assault. Hale could see the strain in his crew's faces, the exhaustion etched into every line. He knew they couldn't keep this up forever. But as he looked around, he saw the flicker of resolve in their eyes, the same fierce determination that burned in his own chest. They would hold. They would fight, not for survival, but for the right to stand unbroken. Brace for impact, he ordered, steeling himself. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. And as the alien fleet bore down on them once more, Hale knew one thing for certain. Surrender was not an option. Chapter 2. The Line We Hold. The bridge of Hale's flagship was a symphony of controlled chaos. Alarms shrieked, lights flickered, and the low hum of damage reports filled the air. Commander Eric Hale's knuckles were white as he gripped the console, watching the tactical display as Earth's last fleet struggled to hold the line against the Council's relentless onslaught. Lieutenant Mari Chen leaned over her station, sweat glistening on her brow as she scanned the data flooding her screen. "Shields are down to 40%, sir," she called out, her voice tense but steady. "Hull integrity's at 62. They're pushing us hard." Hale felt the weight of her words settle in his chest, a cold, steady pressure that threatened to paralyze him. But he couldn't afford hesitation. Not now. "Redirect power from non-essential systems to the forward shields," he commanded, voice edged with urgency. "We need every ounce of energy we can muster." The crew moved with efficient desperation, fingers flying over consoles, adjusting power flow and rerouting damaged circuits. Outside the bridge windows, the stars were nearly obscured by the blazing streaks of enemy fire, slicing through the darkness like bolts of pure hatred. Hale could almost feel the heat of the Council's wrath bearing down on them. "Commander," Chen said, her tone uncharacteristically hesitant. "Incoming message from Admiral Sato. She's on the outer perimeter. Put her through." The holo display flickered, and Admiral Sato's face materialized before him. Her features were etched with exhaustion, her usually calm eyes blazing with intensity. She barely glanced at him before speaking. "Hale, we're getting overrun on the flank. My ships can't hold much longer without reinforcements. I need backup, or we'll be shredded." Hale's jaw clenched. He knew he couldn't spare a single vessel without leaving a gap in their own defenses. But Sato's position was vital. If the flank fell, the Council ships would sweep in from behind, trapping them in a deadly crossfire. "Hold as long as you can, Admiral," he replied, the words heavy. "We're stretched to the breaking point here. I'll send reinforcements if I can." A flicker of disappointment crossed Sato's face, but she nodded, understanding the impossible position they were in. "Understood, Commander. We'll hold. Just give him hell." The display blinked out, leaving Hale staring at the empty space where Sato's image had been. He took a steadying breath, feeling the enormity of their situation pressing down on him. There was no way to win this fight, not in the traditional sense. But they didn't need to win. They just needed to hold long enough for Earth to prepare. He turned to Chun, who was watching him with a mixture of concern and resolve. "We can't afford any mistakes," he said quietly. "Every second we buy here counts." She nodded, her expression softening for a moment. "Understood, sir. We'll give them everything we have." Suddenly, The bridge shuddered violently as a council missile slammed into their port side. Sparks erupted from a nearby console, and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled the air. Hale steadied himself against the railing, gritting his teeth as the ship groaned under the impact. "Port shields are down to 20%, someone shouted. "Divert power from weapons," Hale ordered. "We'll hold the line with maneuverability and timing. Don't let them box us in." The tactical display showed the council ships closing in, their sleek, angular forms moving with ruthless efficiency. They were machines of war, built for domination, and yet they were being held off by a ragtag fleet, patched together with whatever Earth had been able to muster. Hale could only hope that the Council hadn't yet grasped what humanity was willing to sacrifice. Chen's voice cut through his thoughts. "Sir, detecting a shift in the enemy formation. They're rerouting 2 destroyers toward the perimeter." Hale's eyes narrowed as he studied the display. "They're trying to isolate Sato. They know she's our weak point." Chun bit her lip. "Sir, if Sato falls, we're done for." Hale nodded grimly. He knew what needed to be done, but the thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. "Send the Fury and the Indomitable to reinforce her position. I don't care if they have to scrape by on emergency power. She's holding that flank." As Chun relayed his orders, Hale watched the tactical display with a strange calm settling over him. Every decision was a gamble now, every order a roll of the dice. But beneath it all, he felt a strange surge of pride for the people under his command. The way they fought, not for glory or conquest, but simply to survive, to defend their home. Just as the reinforcements broke off from the main fleet, another message crackled over the comms, carrying Vrexka's cold, unyielding voice. "Commander Hale, I must commend your persistence, but your resistance is futile. You cannot hope to hold us off forever." Hale's lips twisted into a humorless smile. "Persistence is one of humanity's finer qualities, Chancellor. We tend to make a habit of it." Vrexka's voice remained smooth, untouched by Hale's defiance. "You do not understand the power you are up against. Your species is limited, bound by weakness. Surrender, and we may grant you mercy." "Mercy?" Hale spat. "You call it mercy to strip us of our identity, to make us a footnote in your council's history?" "No, Chancellor. We'll write our own history, even if it ends here." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Hale could almost picture Vrexka on the other end, considering his words with that cold, calculating mind. "You humans are fascinating," Vrexka finally replied, his tone laced with something that sounded almost like amusement. "Very well, Commander. If it is death you seek, we will oblige." The comm line went dead, and the Council ships surged forward, their formation tightening as they prepared for a full assault. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "They're coming, sir." Hale's gaze swept over his crew, each one a silent testament to humanity's resilience. He knew that this fight, this hopeless stand, would be remembered, not for the outcome, but for the spirit that drove them to make it. "We're not finished yet," he said, his voice carrying a fierce resolve that seemed to infuse the air around him. "We'll hold the line. For Earth." And as the Council fleet descended upon them, the stars themselves seemed to dim in the shadow of the coming battle. Chapter 3. The Spark of Defiance. The hull of Hale's flagship groaned under another barrage, the impact jolting Commander Eric Hale against his seat restraints. The bridge lights flickered, casting frantic shadows on his exhausted crew, their faces lined with tension and resolve. Amidst the chaos, he caught the faint scent of burnt circuitry, a grim reminder of just how close they were to the edge. "Status report," Hale barked, trying to steady his voice over the din of alarms. Lieutenant Mari-chan glanced up from her console, her face pale but determined. "Hull integrity is down to 40%. Shields are practically gone. We're down to basic life support in some sections." Hale clenched his fists, a quiet fury burning in his chest. They had held the line as long as they could, longer than anyone could have expected. But the Council's fleet wasn't relenting. Their ships moved with a precision that was almost mechanical, exploiting every weakness and gap in Earth's defenses. Hale's gaze shifted to the tactical display, showing Admiral Sato's dwindling forces on the outer flank. She was holding, just barely, her fleet battered but still in formation. Hale couldn't shake the thought that this grim fight for survival, would be their final chapter. A sudden beep interrupted his thoughts, and the hollow display crackled to life, revealing the face of Chancellor Vrexka. His alien features were impassive, his tone eerily calm amidst the battle raging around them. "Commander Hale," Vrexka said, his voice low and cold, "I give you one last opportunity to surrender. Your resistance, though remarkable, is ultimately futile." Hale met Vrexka's gaze, refusing to let any hint of despair show. "Surrender? No, Chancellor. You might think you're watching us die, but you're watching something else. You're watching what it means to stand for something that can't be conquered." Vrexka's expression flickered with disdain, or perhaps something close to frustration. "Your resolve is misplaced, Commander. You are throwing away lives for a pointless gesture. Humanity's resilience, while admirable, will not alter your fate." Hale felt a quiet anger rise within him. "If we're meant to die here, then we'll die showing you what it means to fight with everything we have," he said, his voice firm. The screen blinked off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Chen turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, are we really going to push this to the end?" He looked at her, seeing not just a fellow officer, but a person who had stood by him through every crushing loss and slim victory. "They think they can break us because they can break steel and burn through hulls. But they don't understand what drives us. They don't understand why we're here." As if on cue, the ship shuddered again, the hull vibrating as another council ship closed in. Hale felt the pressure of time bearing down on him. If they didn't act soon, all would truly be lost. "Chun," he said, a sudden clarity hardening his voice. "Prepare the crew for Plan Gamma." Chen's eyes widened. Plan Gamma was the last-ditch effort, a maneuver designed to unleash the ship's full remaining firepower in a concentrated strike on the Council's command vessel. It was a suicide mission, one meant only for the moments when hope was as thin as air. "Are you sure, sir?" she asked, her tone laced with both fear and loyalty. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady. "If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as possible. And maybe, just maybe, we'll show them something they'll never forget." Chun nodded, her hands trembling only slightly as she keyed in the command sequence. Around the bridge, a quiet acceptance settled over the crew. No words were needed. They all understood what this meant. The ship's systems hummed to life with renewed intensity, the last of their reserves diverted to weapons. The lights dimmed as non-essential power was rerouted, casting the bridge in an eerie, flickering glow. "Target the Council's command vessel," Hale instructed, his voice resolute. "And wait for my signal." Outside the bridge windows, the stars gleamed cold and distant. The Council ships loomed ahead, their sleek forms an ominous reminder of the brutal force bearing down on them. Hale gripped the console, his knuckles white, feeling the weight of his choices settle on his shoulders. But even as the ship prepared for its final, defiant strike, something unexpected happened. The tactical display lit up with new signatures, dozens of them appearing on the radar from seemingly nowhere. For a brief, bewildering moment, Hale thought the Council had reinforcements. But then Chen's voice broke through, breathless and disbelieving. "Commander, those aren't Council ships. They're Earth vessels." Hale's heart skipped a beat. "What? We don't have any more ships." "How?" "It's the civilian fleet, sir," she said, her voice cracking with something close to awe. "They came, every last one of them, on the display." The ships surged forward, freighters, retrofitted transport vessels, and even luxury liners, each one bristling with makeshift weapons and armor. The Council ships faltered, their formation thrown into disarray as the ragtag armada pressed in from every side. Hale's breath caught in his throat as he watched the civilian ships, so vulnerable, so unprepared for this level of combat, dart through the enemy lines with a desperation born of love for their homeworld. A voice crackled over the comms, the sound scratchy but unmistakably familiar. It was the voice of Captain Lena Monroe, a retired Earth Fleet officer who had once served under him. "Commander Hale," Monroe said, her tone fierce and unyielding. We heard you were putting up a fight. Figured you could use a little help. Hale's throat tightened, a rush of gratitude and pride filling his chest. Captain Monroe, I can't believe it. You're insane. Maybe, she replied with a grim chuckle. But I'd rather go out fighting alongside my people than sitting on the sidelines. Hale's voice steadied, filling with renewed determination. All right, Captain. Let's show the Council what it means to be human. The bridge erupted into movement as Hale's crew adjusted their strategy, coordinating with the civilian fleet. The Council ships, caught off guard by the unexpected reinforcements, struggled to regain their formation. Hale's hand hovered over the console, ready to give the command to fire. But now, with the civilians in the fray, a new possibility gleamed. A chance, however slim, to turn the tide. Cancel Plan Gamma, he ordered, his voice ringing with fresh hope. We fight to live. Outside, the chaos unfolded in a blaze of light and energy. Humanity's final stand transformed into something else entirely. A surge of defiance, of survival against impossible odds. And as Hale's ship joined the formation, rallying alongside the ragtag fleet, he realized that they were no longer alone in the darkness. They were an unbreakable force, bound not by steel, but by the unyielding will to stand and fight. The tide was shifting. Chapter 4. Rising from Ashes. The civilian fleet surged forward like a tidal wave, catching the Council's forces off guard with a determination that outmatched any weapon. On the bridge of his battered flagship, Commander Eric Hale watched the radar as the Council's precision faltered under the unexpected assault. It was chaotic, raw, and utterly human. Despite his exhaustion, a fierce pride filled him. They weren't finished yet. Status report. Hale called out, steadying himself as the ship shuddered under another barrage. Lieutenant Mari Chen's voice was sharp with focus. Shields are critical, but our weapon systems are stable. Civilians are taking heavy hits, though. 3 ships lost already. A grim silence settled over the bridge as the weight of Chen's words sank in. These weren't trained soldiers. They were people who had chosen to stand with Earth, knowing the risks. Hale clenched his fists. If they were going to sacrifice everything, he'd make sure it wasn't in vain. Chun, Hale said, his tone hardened with resolve, relay this to all ships. Concentrate fire on the central dreadnought. We cut off the head, the rest of their formation will crumble. As Chun relayed his orders, Hale turned his attention to the tactical display. The Council dreadnought, a looming beast of reinforced alloys and energy shields, was cutting a swath through the smaller Earth vessels, its weapons devastating anything in their path. But Hale could see a weakness, a small delay in their rotation pattern, just enough for a coordinated strike to land a crippling blow. The ship's comm crackled, and Admiral Sato's weary face appeared on the screen, her voice carrying a grim urgency. Commander, if we're focusing on that dreadnought, I'll need a direct line to it. Can your flagship clear the path? Hale met her gaze with a nod. Count on it. We're with you. Sato's face softened, a fleeting moment of mutual respect. We'll hold the line with you, Eric. Let's show them what happens when they underestimate us. The comm went silent, and Hale turned back to his crew, who were waiting, tense and resolute, for his command. All power to forward thrusters, he ordered, his voice firm. Prepare for a frontal assault. The bridge lights dimmed as power redirected, and the ship surged forward, barreling toward the dreadnought, with Council fighters swarming in their path. The civilian vessels followed in formation, a chaotic mix of freighters and retrofitted transports weaving around one another in a flurry of improvised battle tactics. Enemy fighters closing in, Chen warned, her eyes darting over her console. Hale could feel the ship's system strain under the onslaught as plasma bolts seared past, rattling their already battered hull. Arm the secondary cannons, Hale ordered. Clear our path. The bridge erupted into a symphony of noise as the cannons blazed to life, firing relentlessly at the Council ships. The scent of burnt metal filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of adrenaline. Hale's pulse quickened as they tore through the enemy's defensive line, inching closer to the dreadnought. Then, through the chaos, a transmission came through, a face Hale hadn't expected to see again. Chancellor Vrexka. His expression was cold, yet tinged with a glimmer of something almost like apprehension. "Commander Hale," Vrexka said, his tone laced with barely veiled frustration. "Your resistance is a futile display. Surrender now, and I may yet spare your people." Hale met Vrexka's gaze, his jaw set with defiance. "Spare us," he echoed, the bitterness in his voice unmistakable. "You still don't understand. This isn't just about survival. This is about showing you what it means to fight for something we believe in, something bigger than ourselves." Vrexka's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, his composure faltered. "You think this show of defiance will change anything, Commander? The Council has crushed countless worlds. Your fate will be no different." But Hale only smiled, a fierce glint in his eyes. "Then you're about to learn what happens when you push humans to the brink. We don't break, Vrexka. We rise." The transmission cut off abruptly, and Hale turned to his crew, feeling their resolve echo in the air around him. "All hands," he said over the ship-wide comm, "this is it. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for everything we are. Let's make sure the galaxy remembers this day." The ship surged forward, closing the final distance to the dreadnought. The Council vessel loomed ahead, its weapons beginning to train on them. But Hale saw a glimmer of hope. Admiral Sato's fleet had reached the dreadnought's vulnerable side, positioning themselves for a coordinated strike. "Chun," Hale called, "on my mark, unleash everything we have. Target their shield generators." Chin's fingers flew over her console, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Weapons ready, Commander." The ship shook as the dreadnought opened fire, its cannons tearing into the surrounding vessels. But Hale's crew held their ground, their faces set in determined defiance. "Now!" Hale shouted, and the ship's cannons erupted, launching a barrage of concentrated energy toward the dreadnought's shield generators. The civilians and fleet ships joined in, their firepower converging in a dazzling storm of destruction. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding flash, the dreadnought's shields flickered and failed. "Direct hit," Chin called, her voice filled with triumph. "Their shields are down." Hale didn't hesitate. "All ships, concentrate fire on the core. Let's end this." The fleet's combined firepower poured into the dreadnought, tearing through its exposed hull. The massive vessel buckled under the assault, explosions rippling across its surface as systems failed and reactors overloaded. And then, with a final, thunderous blast, the dreadnought erupted in a blaze of light, its debris scattering into the void. A stunned silence fell over the bridge as the realization settled in. The dreadnought was gone, its wreckage drifting aimlessly. The remaining Council ships began to retreat, their formation breaking as they scrambled to escape. Cheers erupted around him, but Hale's gaze remained fixed on the wreckage, his chest heaving with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had prevailed. Chun turned to him, a tentative smile on her face. "Commander, we did it." Hale allowed himself a small smile, the weight of the moment settling over him. "No, Lieutenant. We all did it. Every single person out there." As the last Council ships vanished into the stars, Hale took a deep breath, feeling the enormity of what they had accomplished. They were bruised, battered, and on the edge of ruin. But they had survived, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. As he looked around the bridge, at the faces of his crew, faces filled with pride, resilience, and the unyielding spirit that had carried them through the darkest hours, Hale felt a surge of hope. This victory wasn't just theirs. It was a testament to what they could achieve together. They weren't just survivors. They were defenders, a force of life that would continue to rise, no matter what came next.